Okay, so I can see going through CVent that there are some attendees in the session. And they don't appear in the Zoom session though, so I'll have to use the CVent for questions, and I'll make sure to raise any questions that come up through the session. So I think we are now live, and I'd like to introduce Michelle, Julie, and Samaya, yeah, as the presenters for this session of usability testing and surveys, a data-driven user-centered approach to designing Canvas templates. If you have any questions, please post them in the Q&A of the CVent application, and I'll make sure that the presenters get those questions. So I'll turn it over to our presenters.
Awesome. Thank you so much, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We're gonna go ahead and get started. We're gonna first briefly introduce ourselves. Starting with myself, I am Michelle Ruiz. I am an instructional designer at the School of Public Health. I am also a student. I am a doctoral student doing EDD and learning technologies at Pepperdine University. And yeah, I'll pass it over to my colleague, Julie.
Excuse me. Thanks, Michelle. I'm Julie Moss. I am also an instructional designer with Berkeley Public Health. I have been in this role at Berkeley for about 7 years. I have also taught for a different institution. I have taught online for just over 20 years. So I'm very interested in the usability of online of learning management system course navigations. Samaya.
Thanks, Julie. Hi, everyone. I am Samaya. So I am a UX researcher and human-computer interaction graduate student at the California College of the Arts. But prior to graduate school, I actually worked at the Berkeley School of Public Health, managing and advising the MPH and PhD students in the epidemiology and biostatistics division. So this is why I'm here.
All right, so these are the topics that we're going to review today, pretty much going over the process, what steps we took to create a new template for our online Masters of Public Health students. And starting with the problem space, the context. Julie?
So the OOMP program is designed for working professionals. It's designed for working professionals to be able to complete their MPH degree remotely in just over 2 years. Our coursework is delivered primarily online in asynchronous formats. With the exception of 2 campus visits, students are required to spend 10 days on campus during the 27 months of the program. And while the background of our students may be very similar to graduate students across public health and across the university, their professional experience and the geographic disbursement create different context and sometimes different needs for our program. And as we'll talk about in a minute, we also have residential students joining us in our courses. Our courses are taught by full-time residential faculty, part-time online faculty, as well as industry experts from public health, medicine, and disaster preparedness. So a little history on our program. In 2012, the program first launched with courses being designed in collaboration with faculty through an outside vendor. Each course was developed independently of one another. And so each course had a unique design that was created through a collaboration between the faculty and the instructional designer assigned to the course. And at the time we had about roughly 50 students in the program. In 2016, the program moved in-house. So we for the first time, had an in-house instructional designer that was then embedded with the instructional team and was part of the overall program. At this point, what had been independent navigation templates for every single course designed independently between that instructional designer and that faculty team, we now had built a single navigation template that was consistent across all of our courses. Now, we employed adult learning theory and principles of universal design in developing this navigation template, but what we did not do is consult with students in the development of this navigation template. Though, of course, students had the opportunity to complete evaluations in each course, we weren't specifically responding to individual student feedback on the course sites. And despite the iterative development of our courses and our programs, we were not heavily adapting the template from term to term. Then in 2018, our courses were opened up to all residential Berkeley Public Health graduate students. Then in 2020, the pandemic, as we all know, required the residential courses to go online very quickly, and on a couple days' notice. At the time, a lot of the residential courses were barely using Canvas or B courses at all. And so when they needed to very quickly migrate over to B courses, a lot of faculty chose the approach of continuing to teach synchronously on Zoom while using B courses as sort of a repository for course content, but not necessarily having a deliberate structure and navigation scheme. That said, what was then called ETS, now RTL, Central Campus Unit on learning technology, had developed a template for campus-wide use throughout the remote era of the pandemic. We adapted that template somewhat for use within Berkeley Public Health so that the residential courses in Berkeley Public Health were using an adaptive form of that template. Meanwhile, our online MPH courses were continuing to use the template that we had been using since 2016. Then in 2022, as the slow transition back to campus began, the residential courses continued using what was a very effective template in B courses, which we're going to call the residential template. But faculty began to comment on the challenges of using two entirely different templates for teaching both residential and online courses. Moreover, because we had residential students taking the online courses, often residential students were also alternating between taking a course in the online MPH program using our custom design template and the template that the residential courses were using. So we realized now that there was a problem, there was a gap in having these two very different navigation templates that users were migrating between. So we found, though, that there was a benefit to both the templates and that there were their strengths and areas for development in both of them. And we recognized this as an opportunity to capitalize on the strengths of each through user testing. So this is where we developed a mechanism for assessing the user experience in each of the templates and studying that user experience to identify where the strengths were and where the rooms for improvement were in both templates. So now we have over 200 online students in our program, supplemented by the residential students in the online courses. So we're a much larger program than we were in 2012 or 2016, and the needs have evolved as the size of our program has evolved.
So as Julie mentioned, we try to identify the strengths and the challenges of each of the different templates. But before we even embarked in the research and like user testing, before doing all of that, we thought about like, oh, what if there's like what if a lot of students prefer one over the other, and that will be an easy choice. Like we can just build out of one of the templates. And we decided to have students, the same cohort, they take 2 courses each semester when they first start in our program. Let's have the students one of their courses is going to be with the residential template, and the other course is going to be with the template. And then we're just going to ask which ones do they prefer. And to our surprise, it was a close call. Like, it was very, I thought it was going to be like a skew over one over the other, but it was something that made us think like, well, we need to investigate further and decide what to do next. So that's when we posed the question, like, so how can we design even like a new template that has the features from both? And we decided to use what many hopefully are familiar with, which is human-centered design or design thinking. And one of the first steps is to have a challenge question that guides the design process. And here's what what was guiding us at that time, like, how might we foster a more practical online learning experience that enables frictionless student navigation? And we decided to focus first on the student experience. We know that faculty obviously are part of our learning ecosystem, but as the first step, we decided to first take into account the student perspective and make sure that we're meeting their needs when they come into our courses.
Yeah, so as Michelle highlighted, our challenge question really helped us set the stage and define the scope of our research. So as a team, what we opted for was a human-centered design approach, which for context is actually this problem-solving methodology that really places the needs, preferences, and behaviors of users, in this case, students, at the core of our design and development process, especially for future iterations of the B course template. So in this case, for us, the goal was to really assess students' overall experience with these 2 templates by asking them specific questions, but also having them complete very specific tasks within kind of the B course interface. So we had them complete tasks like, how did you go about learning about the weekly assignments, to navigating to like a video lecture, for example, all the way to, how did you go about contributing to a discussion forum? So these were all specific tasks that really helped us, one, examine factors influencing their template preference in different usage contexts. So in other words, the specific use cases and the various elements that would impact and influence why some students would prefer one template over the other. And then the second is common usability issues as students were engaging with these 2 different templates. So everything from content interpretation to what's the design layout, how does that read to them, all the way to behaviors that may prevent them to complete a specific task. So moving forward into our recruitment strategy, so we actually recruited a really broad spectrum of professional students with differing levels of confidence in technology. We actually had a lot of interest from students who wanted to share their experiences with us. And so one of the ways we narrowed down our pool is we actually utilized a screener to capture folks with varied backgrounds and technological expertise. So you'll see in this graph, there are folks from 2 ends of the spectrum. So first we have like first-year students who may be brand new to using the and the Berkeley Public Health templates and may not feel as confident about using kind of the B course template, all the way to second-year students who may have had prior exposure to these templates already. So they have some kind of like mental model that's already set in stone, but they might also feel confident about the digital technologies or not. So we wanted to just capture both perspectives to have like a more holistic understanding of how they navigate and go about these templates. And so once we finalized our recruitment and had students on board, we facilitated these 60-minute usability testing interviews with 8 different students to, one, really investigate factors like their preference and really understand their core needs and pain points by asking them like the specific task questions, which I mentioned previously within the interface. And so the participants engaged in these tasks over Zoom, and we actually screen shared and had them guide us through specific tasks. And something to highlight here during this usability testing that really allowed us to gain really rich insights is the fact that we utilize this real think aloud approach, which allows students to describe what they're seeing, what they're trying to do, and anything that they may find surprising. So we really paid close attention to how long did it take to complete certain tasks and really gather their interpretations for the different features. So I'll pass it on to Michelle, who will discuss a little bit about, how we went about synthesizing our results.
Yeah, so as Maya said, we had those 60-minute, 1-hour interviews with students, and then we transcribed the interviews and started to code the transcripts. Basically, what we were looking for in the transcripts is just patterns and finding commonalities in students' experience. And that really helped us kind of like synthesize all of the information that students gave us. And we used this tool, which I think made it very easy for us to code all of the transcripts. But although it is a tedious and long process, it was, I think, worth it to go over all of the comments and what the students said to us so that we wouldn't miss anything. And I personally was taking a qualitative course at that time, and I was eager to apply what I was learning in class into this context. So yeah, after doing all the coding, we came out with various insights. And
so the primary insights that we came up with may have seemed very straightforward, very intuitive, and yet a lot of the design features that we had put into our template did come from adult learning theory and did come from principles of universal design and had been adapted based on course surveys throughout the years. And yet the user experience study brought out different results than we had expected even then. So some of the feedback we received were remove unnecessary visuals, make sure that weekly activities stand out, so that even though our courses had checklists based on adult learning theories, that each weekly module had checklists, we were still hearing that students would like a little bit more emphasis on the weekly activities to complete, and that digital tools should be named consistently. And this is something that we always that we more or less believed we were doing, but when we really observed the user experience, saw small ways in which these inconsistencies were creating even the smallest elements of confusion. One thing I'm not sure we actually have addressed yet is that our program runs 3 different sequences each semester. So we have 2 8-week sessions and 1 15-week session each semester. So students are often transitioning between 8-week courses with only a couple days off between the courses. And so while our goal is always to minimize the cognitive load of adapting from one course to the next very quickly and jumping in and participating in that course, we are especially wanting to prioritize making sure that navigation is not an obstacle to students being able to adapt very quickly to their next course. That said, there is, of course, the necessary balance of making sure that we're also addressing individual needs of each course and different styles of different faculty and different instructional teams. So there's a lot that goes into it, but one huge benefit of this study was having the data from the user experience to really say in each new course development, these are the elements that students have identified as making the leap from one course to the next every 8 weeks more conducive.
And I also want to add that from an instruction design point, I think we were so familiar with the templates that I was surprised at how students were looking at them, and I learned so much just from seeing it from their perspective. Like it was so helpful to just stop and ask like and see how they use it. Because I think as our instructional design team is so used to putting courses together that we really needed that fresh perspective. So I'm when I share the slides, you can see this video, but I think to really show how our site looks, let me just take you through a quick tour. I think, one second, let me just make sure I'm just sharing that. All right. So here's how the template turned out. And we are continuously incorporating student feedback. I call it a prototype because it's still a work in progress. And what some elements that you can see here is just like the weekly activities are much more clear compared to our other template. And I used to get really excited with like the decorations on the homepage and making it very, colorful. But then I heard from students like, why is that taking center stage? So just making sure that anything that is not contributing to their learning experience, that we don't necessarily need to have it there. So we just have like a very simple banner. And then inside of each week, we have just a short overview of what the week is about. We continue to have the weekly reader, which is not really part of the template, but is like a document where students can download all of their lectures and readings in one single package. And I'll just show it really quick, just so that all of you who are not familiar with the program, this is what the reader looks like, which is a pretty useful study document. And then here is the checklist. Like we had a checklist, like very straightforward, but what students highlighted in the user testing interviews is that they wanted it to be more prominent and also easier to read. So we decided to just use iconography, have it at the top of the page. Also let the students know how much time they might be they're gonna be watching lectures, and yeah, so this is what in collaboration with the students who we interviewed, this is the design that we decided to integrate in terms of the checklist. And then here's where we have all the lectures, the readings. Some courses have like podcasts like this one, and here's all the information about the assignments. And it can get lengthy. So we have like these links for them to navigate to specific pages if needed. And yeah, we're now naming our tools consistently. For example, the ed discussions, we used to like call them ed discussion, but some of the students were like, well, so what is the Q&A forum? Now we name everything Q&A forum. And yeah, those are like in an overview, the different changes that we made. So I'm looking for my PowerPoint. Back. So in terms of next steps, we continue to have a question about the template in our end of course evaluations, and students provide feedback. As new cohorts come in, we continue to incorporate ideas. But right now, what we are planning to do is to, using the same methodology of human-centered design, is to see what is the instructor's perspective with this new template, and identify opportunities and identify opportunities and the challenges to continue improving this template, but now focusing on the instructor's perspective. And I don't know if Somaya or Julie want to add something. Otherwise, that's our presentation. Thank you so much.
Do we have any questions?
So far, we don't have any questions. So I'd ask the audience to please put your questions into the Q&A in the CVent application if you have any.
Well, one thing I'd like to do, Michelle, if you wouldn't mind, while we're waiting to see if we get any questions, would you like to show what the original template looked like before?
Of course.
So what Michelle's going to bring up is a template we were actually using up until a year ago. So 2016 through 2022. So we're now just completing our first year with the new template that Michelle's been showing you.
So I'm gonna put the same course. Oh, sorry. Same course, previous template. So yeah, for example, like the weeks were not so much highlighted. Oh, but this is not a good example. 1 second. Let me bring another one. Yeah, so this is a good example. There were sometimes, well, for example, the semester long courses where we didn't spell out the week, and some students were saying like, oh, at first when I first came into this B course site, I didn't know exactly what that W meant. So now we make sure to spell out the weeks and make them more prominent, because another comment that a student made is like, if the week navigation is so important, why is it so tiny? Why is it so like not as prominent in the week in the homepage? But yeah, this is what. Oh, never mind. As you can see, we were using both in different. Let me find. Let's see. Sorry. Let's see. Okay, this is a good example. Okay. So this is we will have everything in tab form, and for some reason I'm not able to click on it. Oh, there we go. So this is basically the organization before we created that, like I said, that format. And as I explained, like this was our checklist without a lot of visual cues to differentiate the items. And we have a question from the chat. What have you found most difficult with user testing with new users?
What have you found most difficult with user testing with new users?
I don't know if there were difficulties, but a lot of insights. I learned a lot, like I said.
I think one of the most important things about usability testing that a lot of users don't really think about is like, one, when you're interviewing somebody, it seems like we're testing them, but we're really not. It's about making sure and emphasizing that we're testing the template. We're not testing the user's capabilities or, ability to navigate digital technology. So when it comes to like testing, whether it's a new user or an old user, I think it's important to highlight that any kind of usability issues that they may encounter actually helps us learn more about the B course template itself and is like not a reflection of their own abilities. And given that, so I was not exactly part of the instructional design team as we were doing the usability testing, but someone like Michelle and Julie, they were. So sometimes users would feel afraid to like not be able to successfully complete a task or say something incorrectly to like please us. So I think just like emphasizing that, this is something that will allow us to create these like iterative designs moving forward was like probably the most challenging part. And making sure that, this can be like an objective, like way of having a dialogue around how we can co-create a template that works by putting students at the forefront.
And there is another question that, do you make the template available? Yes. And do instructors use it, or are the courses? So both. So we make the template available to the residential faculty who are interested in using it, which nowadays is a lot of faculty use the template given their experience from the pandemic teaching remotely. And yeah, the online, specifically the online MPH courses, the instructional design team manages the development of the course, including the template. But I mean, depending on the instructor's familiarity with V courses, we have, all over the spectrum, there's faculty who are very comfortable updating their sites, and there's like other faculty who really need the support. And yeah, so this is where I was just going to quickly show how faculty get to our template. So in the Berkeley Public Health site, we have a teaching resources place, and here's where they can get to the template and other ways to connect with us.
I'll add that one benefit of the template, and even though we did the user study with students, not with faculty, the original template with the horizontal navigation, the horizontal tabs that we had up until 2022, we were still using adult learning theory. We were still using chunking to make the content to reduce cognitive load in navigating the content in the original navigation template. However, one thing that was problematic is that faculty could break the code very easily, trying to make even small edits in the original template. Again, we were a smaller program. We had a lot more time to spend addressing even the smallest tasks of daily maintenance. And that wasn't something we had necessarily considered in the original template. And as our program grew, even though we were responding to student needs, it actually really addressed faculty needs as well, to create a template that was easier to edit on the front end and didn't require as much understanding of the back end to edit. And that's been a huge benefit, I think, that we have seen over the past year.
We have another question. Have you shared your testing results with faculty? And if so, what has been their reaction? So we haven't explicitly shared our results. It's been more because we work so closely with faculty that one-on-one have been sharing what we learned, and especially when they try to make modifications to the template, that's when we bring up these key insights and our research just letting them know that we're making, we're applying this format for a reason. And these are the student preferences. We incentivize student also just answer. I don't know if Sumaya or Julie want to add anything to the previous question, or.
No, I think that makes sense. I would just qualify when you said when faculty try to make modifications to the template. When faculty request that modifications be made to the template, I don't think we've ever experienced a faculty member trying to make modifications on their own.
Yeah, exactly.
And I guess something else that I wanted to highlight is, our belief, like the fact that we used a human-centered design approach means that we have a core belief in iterative design. So obviously moving forward in the next steps, I think it would also be important to see and like test out the templates with faculty and see their mental models, because it could be completely different from how the students view the template itself. And we have students from all walks of life, right? Like these are professional students, students with families, students who are on the go, have a full-time job. So they may view kind of the course and they just want to be able to get from point A to point B. So I think it's really important that we can make improvements and that can be made continuously based on real-time like feedback from both students as well as instructors, so that it ensures that our platform can evolve to meet their changing needs moving forward. So that as long as we have a template that's flexible and adaptable, I think that's kind of like how we would measure success in a way.
Yeah, so there's another question too about how do we incentivize student participation. So we give them a gift card. And we thought about making it, I think it was $50-$60, given that they were contributing substantial amount of time. So yeah, we incentivize participation that way, and it was I think successful. And then the question about what tool do you use to synthesize the tool? It's called Delve. Oh, sorry, you won't be able to see the chat, but let me just share my screen. This one is called Delve, and it's a paid application, but it's so worth it, I think, to have a place where you can put all your transcripts and really easily code the text. So I highly recommend it.
There are also other tools like Otter. And if you really want to not use any kind of digital tools, I think you can start like bare bones with just colorful Post-its and be able to like write out these insights and kind of conduct something called affinity mapping, which allows you to take insights of like different interpretations from like across like different team members, and how, because all three of us, we may view an insight very like differently. So it allows us to kind of create these themes so that you can know like what it really is like the core pain point for students. And I think there's another question.
There is, and I think this is a really important question in our last couple of minutes. So how is accessibility addressed in your template design and download files?
Yeah, so definitely accessibility was also part of our design process, and the previous template was already accessible. We continue to use the same what's called good practices. So we have a hierarchy of all the text, all of our files. We check them through the Ali tool. All of those things we continue to do. So I think I don't know if Julie, you want to add anything?
Just that's it's a big part of our design process, and we have had because we have had students who are using assistive technology to access our courses. We've had in real time feedback that our courses do maintain that level of accessibility.
And then just general best practices of using things like alt text for images and captions in the video lectures, for example, and making sure that there's a sharper color contrast between like the text as well as the background, so that, you know, students with, you know, perhaps like vision difficulties are able to read, and also use things like screen readers.
Any other questions?
If that is all the questions, I want to thank, first of all, the presenters for a very excellent, interesting, and engaging presentation. All the attendees for their questions. For those attendees, your feedback is important, and we would like to direct you to the survey that's available through CVent. You can provide feedback about the presentation there. Thank you all for attending, and that wraps up our session. Have a great day.
Thanks to our session host.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.